Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Emily Berg, and I'm coming to you from Key West at Books and Books at the Studios of Key West, a nonprofit bookstore in partnership with the Books and Books of Miami. On behalf of all the Books and Books locations, I welcome you to a virtual evening with Susan Connolly to discuss her new novel, Landslide. Susan Connolly grew up in Maine. She is the author of 4 previous books, including Elsie Come Home. She has won the Maine Literary Award, the Maine Award for Publishing Excellence. She is a founder of The Telling Room, a youth creative writing center in Portland, Maine, where she lives and teaches on the faculty of Stone Coast Writing Program. To moderate tonight's conversation is one of the co-founders of this store of Books and Books in Key West, author Judy Blume. Throughout the evening's broadcast, you're invited to ask questions by clicking the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen. And you can order your copy of Landslide from Books and Books at the studios below by pressing the green button. We appreciate each and every order and the generous donations from viewers everywhere. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests, Judy Blume and Susan Conley.
Wow, Susan, finally. We had a few technical glitches there, but we're here. I think, right?
We are. We're here.
I can hear you. That's good. That's good. Well, I'm really excited. Let's just show this gorgeous book. I know you're seeing it inside out or upside down, but this cover, this gorgeous cover, just won an award, didn't it? Just win something, Susan?
LitHub loved this cover for February. It said it was one of the best covers, and I love it. It's gorgeous.
It is gorgeous. And even if it's whatever, it's beautiful. So, you know, there's some novels that you read, that I read, and I love them. They're great. It's fun. And then I close the book and I put it on the shelf. And I don't think about it anymore. And then there are some novels like your Landslide that, you know, the characters are so alive. The world you've created for them is such a fully realized one. I know I'll never forget these characters. And more than that, it's a story that keeps me thinking, keeps me wondering. And frankly, there are days when I worry. I worry about your characters and what's going to happen to them after I've left them in your book. So, where did this come from? What was the spark that started you wanting to tell this story?
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. That is probably the greatest compliment I could have, is that the characters are living on with you, Judy.
They are. I can't tell you what I'm worried about because I don't want it to be a spoiler, but I'm so worried. Okay.
I know. We'll have to sort out our worries maybe tonight, what we really think. I had a strong drive to write a story that honored and celebrated these teenage boys, these wolves, as Jillian calls them, the mother in Landslide. And I had an equally strong drive to try to capture something about coastal Maine, working class fishing Maine. And I kept orbiting how I would do it. And the one thing I always knew, is that they would be very isolated on an island, and that the father, Kit, would be injured and he would be gone. And that was all I knew.
Well, that was a good start. I mean, coastal Maine.
Yeah.
You know, and I've read Elsie Come Home. And so your settings are almost as important as the characters. I mean, your settings are characters. So coastal Maine is very important. And I have to tell you that, you know, the ocean, the wild weather, I mean, things that you can't control. And sometimes when I was reading, even though I live in Key West and I've got a very warm ocean right outside there, that door, I had to go put on a sweatshirt and wrap myself up because the story made me so cold. It's for the most part, it's winter. It gets to be winter, and all those tones of gray and the ocean and the winds. That's how I was living in it so much that I had to get warm.
love that. I love hearing that. I was worried, Judy, how many times could I render the ocean? They live on an island. How many times could I try to describe the sky? But, for all the writers out there listening, I challenged myself in terms of the language, and I kept creating, and my hope was I kept creating sort of pressure on this family with the weather, with the crossing they have to do to get to the mainland every time. They live in a little tiny island, and they drive this little skiff back and forth. They're a real fishing family, as we say in Maine. But yeah, another pressure on them was, it's getting late in the season. It's November. They shouldn't be on that island. It's getting cold.
Yeah. Yes. And while we're on Maine, and before we move into other characters, you have a long connection with Maine. Tell us just something about that.
Well, in Maine, we, like a lot of places, we count our generations. So I'm fourth generation Maine. My family is all mid-coast. And if you're from the coast of Maine, it's almost inevitable that you will live around fishing. Fishing is part of the DNA of where I'm from. I'm not from a fishing family, but it's just, you just reach out and touch. It's everywhere around me. And I know we have a lot of beloved family friends and people that are deeply into fishing. And that was really a huge part of the novel for me, was, could I try to render this Maine that not everyone sees and knows, even when they come and visit Maine? Could I render this other working Maine?
And you did it beautifully. And your descriptions that you were talking about a minute ago were so vivid. And I don't think you overdid the ocean at all. I just felt, I think of the novel, you know this already. I think of the novel as a nor'easter. And it's coming. We know that it's coming. And then, the winds start, and suddenly we're in the middle of this huge storm. And where is it going to end? Is it ever going to end? And I like thinking of it that way, because I've experienced some nor'easters myself, and I just felt the tension of it. And it just kept me going and going and going. But let's get to your other characters, aside from the ocean and the weather, and Maine, all very important. So Jill, your protagonist, is a complex woman who loves her husband, Kit, and her two teenage sons that she calls inside her head. I don't think she ever calls them the wolves to anyone else, does she?
You're right. It's just in her head.
Just inside her head, she describes them as the wolves. And so she's a wife who loves her husband. She's a mother who loves her kids. She's a documentary filmmaker. And then something terrible happens, terrible, that leads to this storm within. And that threatens, I think, to tear apart the life she thought she knew. And the drama of parenting these boys, the teenage boys, the wolves, the challenges and the worries and the humor. And I just have one line that Candy says to her in the book. She says to Jill, "No one will love you more or be meaner to you than your own kids." And so tell us about the wolves. Where did they come from? And even the expression, I'm dying to know. Did you know that before when you started, you were going to have these boys that you called the wolves?
I love that you pulled that line, Judy. That I've been doing a fair number of talks, and we haven't landed on that wonderful line.
Good.
That was a key line for the book. That was hugely important. As a writer, you land on these little lines that are like little purchases, right? Or little places to stand. And when she dared to say that, or, no one can be meaner than your kids and also love you more, I felt like, okay, Jill's going to be really honest. She's going to be really, unflinching and tough. The boys came to me. I was driving up the coast I was going to Wiscasset, a small little tiny speck of a town, and Fleetwood Mac came on the car radio, and I started singing at the top of my lungs. And then I smiled to myself to know how much my boys would hate how loudly I was singing. I got there, I pulled over, and I always keep some little notebook. I'm a notebook sort of I always have notebooks. And I had a notebook in my bag, and I scribbled the lines that are the opening lines, really, like, nobody wants to grow up in Maine like you did, Mom, on Stevie Nicks. And then they became the wolves. These two boys, they instantly became the wolves. And I felt like I unlocked them when I realized they were wolves, because, I mean, wolves are really complicated.
Well, but that's a major part of the story. And by the way, I know you know this, you're getting a wonderful review in the Sunday, New York Times Sunday Book Review this coming Sunday. And the reviewer really, really loves the wolf connection. She starts with wolves and tells us about wolves, and then goes on to these boys who you call the wolves. So why don't you, since we're talking about that, why don't you read us a little taste so we can have a little taste of Jill and her wolves.
And the wolves. Okay. We'll do a little wolf work.
Or just the wolves, whatever you want, your choice.
Yeah, let's see. Where are they? I'll just read from the very opening, because this is where they get established. And, you know, it's really fun to pull a metaphor like wolves, because they're incredibly feral and physical and loyal, and then they're incredibly smart and devoted. And I don't know, I had a lot of fun subverting some of these stereotypes around masculinity with the wolf. You know, the wolf can be many things. All right, so here's the very opening. It's late afternoon at the end of a long October when the Fleetwood Mac song comes on. We're halfway down the peninsula, and I tell the wolves I was raised on Stevie Nicks. So could they please let me listen to the whole thing, because Sam, the younger one, has a bad habit of changing the station. Mom, he says in his deadpan and stares out the cracked windshield, I already knew that about you growing up on Stevie Nicks. He's 16 and gangling with poking collarbones like little car door handles. He wants to be a professional basketball player, but will settle for rock musician. And I'll skip ahead a little bit. Every time I turn on the radio, he says in his most sarcastic voice, it's Stevie, the good witch of the West Nicks. The thing is, Mom, I don't want to grow up in Maine on Fleetwood Mac like you did. Charlie's in the back seat. He's our moral police, 17 going on something like 33. He thinks sports are a hoax and believes in the laws of physics. And I'll stop there. But now we've met each of the wolves, right? They're 17 and 16 years old. They're very close in age, and they're very different boys.
And they're so real that I wanted to shake them. I wanted to slug them, and sometimes I wanted to hug them. And I think, Jill is very honest in sharing her feelings with us about them. She's a wonderful mother, but she struggles. And the thing that's different, I think, in this book about these teenage boys is that usually when we get teenagers, we get their point of view, telling us, sharing with us about how uncool their parents are, how stupid they are, what their mother tried to sing along with Fleetwood Mac, and what a jerk she is. And I have to tell you that my grandson once said to me, stop singing. You can't sing. And I was so hurt. I was so devastated, because I love to sing, and I can sing, but I only sing, for myself in the shower. And this was so much like that. But in getting, in teenagers sharing their inner lives with us, in this case, this book is Jill's point of view. And so it's first person, isn't it? It's first person.
It is, yeah.
And so we are hearing it from for the first time, I think, from the mother's point of view. And she'll say things and then she'll backtrack and say, oh my God, why did I say that? I just ruined it all. It's just so good. It's just so good. So I think a lot about Jill's marriage to Kit. She loves him and he loves her. And but he's in the hospital. And so there are long separations here because he's in the hospital in Nova Scotia, right? It's a 7-hour drive. And I would love you to give us just that little scene when Jill is with Kit in the hospital and a surprise visitor comes into the room.
Okay.
I think it's page, do you want me to tell you? I'm sure you know exactly where it is.
I do. I have it. So you're taking us right to the heart of the matter. Right to now we're ratcheting up.
Is it too soon? Is it
no,
too soon?
I love it. No, I mean in the book. I just love it.
Okay.
Capital P tension. Okay. So he's just had his surgery because he has his trawler the engine has exploded way out to sea, and he's been helicoptered to this hospital in Halifax. He became more himself after the surgery, but also sadder in the hospital. His blood pressure fluctuated and there were hours of silence and moods. After the first week, Linda made me go to the Halifax Best Western for one night, even though I didn't want to. She said my exhaustion was catching up with me and the Kit needed me rested, and she knew I wasn't really sleeping in the chair by his bed. So I left the hospital and went to the hotel, and it wasn't good, and I didn't sleep at all. I worried about the boys and if they were okay without me, and I worried about Kit and if he was in too much pain and had no one in the room to help him. I drove back to the hospital in the morning and sat in the chair by his bed again, and I think he liked it, that I was there. He kept saying he wanted to go home. The bifocal surgeon came in the afternoon and told us the rehab would take at least another week and that then they would decide if he could do the rest of it in Maine. But it could be months, the surgeon told us, before Kit was really walking again. I remember Kit asked me things about my film after the surgeon left and if I had enough footage and whether I was pleased with it. And I was happy that he asked. It was a good sign, even if he was just pretending to be interested. I told him that I had hours and hours of his people laughing and working in the village, and that his past had become my preoccupation while he'd been gone. I heard a dog bark in the hall then, and this was surprising. I hadn't heard an animal the whole time I'd been in the hospital. Then a woman opened the door and peered in. She had long, black, wavy hair, feathered in front, and a serious face. And when she shoved the door all the way open with her shoulder, my first thought was, here we go again, another of Kit's followers. She had a black duffel bag in her right hand that was only partly zipped, so you could see the top half of a little dog in the bag, maybe some kind of terrier. She put the bag on the floor and took the dog out and held it up to her face and told it to be quiet, or we'll get kicked out of here, Maxwell. Then she waved at me and said her name was Marsh. Kit said, Jill, please meet the woman who called the Coast Guard after the boat caught fire. He didn't look at me while he talked. He looked at her, so it was the strangest feeling. Marsh said she'd been a fish cutter on the boat and the cook, and that Kit had chosen the dog for her at the shelter, so she was forever grateful to him. She talked very loudly. I wanted her to leave. We'd been quiet in the room for days. I got up from the chair and stood by the bathroom door and stared at the tattoo on her right wrist, 3 intricate black roses all woven together. I couldn't believe the time the tattoo must have required. Kit smiled at her. Don't pretend you haven't been thinking of a dog just like him. I thought I'd suffocate when he smiled at her. I almost could not breathe.
How many of us have not been in such a situation? I don't know. When you see the beloved flirting with someone else, whether or not it means anything or not, it's such a betrayal. That's how I feel about it. This is such a betrayal. And of course, we go on, and no spoilers here. Right? But
Judy, I have a little thought I want to share,
Yeah.
which is that there's this line that goes, I thought at first it was, here we go again, another of Kit's followers. And I know that my beloved editor at Knopf, Carol Barron, is with us tonight.
Hi, Carol.
Every now and then, an editor, genius editor like Carol, will have an idea. So here we go again. That should have a footnote, Carol Barron.
But the here we go again isn't another lover. That's not it. It's that he collects.
Exactly.
You tell us.
Right. Exactly. And I was saying it in a more complicated way. And every now and then, it's just this amazing thing when Carol will say, what if we just try that? And it was just perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
So I smile. Whenever I read that line, I smile.
Right. So long as we know, because not everyone has read the book yet, that Kit, people gravitate toward Kit, and you say 50 friends here and 50 friends there and everywhere he goes. And so here we go again, he's got these followers. But until that little flirtatious smile, that's, kind of changes everything.
Right.
And hurts. And it hurts.
I know. It does hurt. It does hurt. I mean, he's a legend. And I know a lot of these people in the Maine I grew up in. He's a legend in true life in his fishing village. And he's 5th generation of that village. So he has a lot of people that are drawn to him. He's one of those boat whisperers, he can fix a boat. He's always had success as a fisherman until recently. So she's used to him having followers. And I'm actually very interested in that kind of dynamic too, Judy. When you meet people that in a marriage or in any relationship where they give each other room. So she knows he has followers and she's okay with that in theory.
Yes. Yes. And yet there's something about this moment that's different.
Right.
Am I wrong?
No, that's it.
She wants her to go. She wants her to go.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, to me, it was betrayal. That kind of moment is betrayal, a kind of betrayal. So this is going to be a crisis in Kit's life. And if he can't fish, I mean, that is the crisis, right? For him, if he can't fish, what does he do?
Right. And that was one of the very explicit driving questions of the novel. What does he do? What do thousands of Maine fishermen do? It's funny, Judy, I was thinking about that word betrayal. The thing about the betrayal is, does it in the end cause Kit to be more honest than he has ever been in his life? And we won't give away the ending, but I think it's really interesting how betrayal can then be a catalyst for great honesty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not easy, but yes, I think so. So, Susan, I think we should talk a little bit about the writing process.
Oh, okay.
Because there are people who really like to know about that. And I heard you and Lily King talking about the writing process. I think we're okay here. And you described your process, or maybe she described your process as chaotic. And when I heard that, I sat up so straight in my chair, because here was another one. I mean, that's me. I'm so chaotic. I always describe it as having a very messy mind. Tell me about you.
Oh my God, I love that. I love that you have the messy mind. And I'm not allowed to have a love fest tonight, but can I just say now, like, my body's tingling to be talking about process with Judy Blume. I mean, I could actually get a little weepy. I grew up on Judy Blume. So just the idea that we're sharing notes is really deeply thrilling to me. I could jump out of my Zoom screen. So yeah, I love the messiness of it. I need to have like these emotional sort of little zingers, jolts come to me, and I scribble. So I really do. I ever since Lily made me show my process, I've kept these journals in here, and they're many and they're messy, but there is some method to the madness. So I'll finish one, and then I'll actually go through it and circle and underline all the what I would call the heat, all the good stuff, and then I start building. But I really got into that idea of emotional curiosity. I don't know if this resonates for you at all, Judy, but what emotions am I really curious about here? They drive me, I would say.
This is once you've gotten your idea for your book. This is
yep.
Before
Exactly.
you actually start the writing and during the whole process.
And it keeps refining. So at first it might have been what would happen to Jill's heart if there was a slight betrayal. And then as we go, right, we ratchet that up, and we keep seeing how she'll react. And I just keep building. And I definitely do go through to the end, but gosh, I'm never beholden to the ending. I think we changed this ending several times as it got deeper. It kept getting deeper and deeper. And I loved that, right up to the end. There were these confessions happening. The characters were starting to really tell their stuff. And that only comes for me through like attrition and accumulation and time. Now you have to say something about your madness.
I mean, draft after draft after draft after draft. And the first drafts, I always say if I died during a first draft, nobody would have a clue what I was writing about or trying to write about. Because it's just, it's the idea is there, but it's digging, always looking for it. And I finally got smart enough to start I print out a lot. So I print out on 3-hole paper and put it into loose leaf notebooks. And I don't know how many of them I had with my last book, maybe 20.
Oh,
it was a mess. And that happened to me because I got stuck with Summer Sisters in cartons. I didn't have it all in notebooks then, and I had cartons and cartons of printouts, and I didn't know what I had. It was chaos. It was so chaotic. It was such a mess. And like Lily said, Susan, you're so neat, or maybe she told me this, Susan is so neat in her house. Everything is perfect. And yet when you go into her study, you see piles all over. Is that fair?
It is fair. The first time, Lily has seen my study many, many times, but it is wonderfully chaotic. I think it's clearly some psychological thing, right? That's where I get to be reckless and really messy. And I love it. I have photos everywhere, and I have, talismans and you name it. I have it.
What kind of talismans?
Oh, I have the obvious, like the shells, and then I have little things. Stones are very important to me. I have a lot of stones. Sometimes I will just write down key things, beautiful things people have said about writing, and I'll just keep them like little mantras. One of the big ones for me for a long time was, and I can't even remember who said it, but I don't teach talent, I teach stubbornness. And I was using that as a professor, but it was also, God, you have to be stubborn when you're writing a novel, right? To get through the madness.
Yeah, you have to be determined. Yes. What brings you back every day? What brings me back is maybe there'll be a surprise today. Maybe something good is going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. And if you ask me, I'll ask you, what do you like about writing? And then I'll tell you. What do you like about writing, Lily? Susan?
Well, I like the surprise too, very, very much. I like the distillation in dialogue, where something big gets sort of transmitted. But wait, I have to ask you: when you were writing the books that I grew up on, Judy, were you? Because I was really aware that I wanted Sam and Charlie to not be stereotypes. And I wanted them to talk about sex and drugs and to have all kinds of flare-ups with their mom. And I wanted to honor them as boys. And I'm wondering, were you aware of how kind of radical some of your teenage characters were, back in the day? No. Did they surprise you? Did those teenagers surprise you?
Yes, characters surprise me. That's the only thing I like about writing. I mean, I like writing dialogue, and I like, when it surprises me, and I could sit down then at the dinner table when I had little kids and a husband and say, you will not believe what so-and-so did today. And I talk about them like, these are people I live with. I can't believe she did that. But she did it. And, because it comes out of some other place. I wanted to tell you that I had a beloved editor, Dick Jackson, and Dick, when he came to my house and would see, I would throw everything on the floor. So I had piles of paper all over the floor, notebooks and papers and everything. And he said, this is the place that you let go. I see that now. This is the one place that you really, really let go. And I think that that's true. And I like that about writing also. The letting go and being in some other part of your head, right?
Letting go. I mean, we could talk about that for hours, couldn't we? What that really means for a writer, and letting go of the reins, letting go of control of the characters. And I think it's across genre. I mean, I think of all the nonfiction writers that I love and all the students that I work with in nonfiction too, who, if they will just let go a little more and kind of actually, like immerse more, commit more to the risk and to the emotional complexity, things will happen. Control really gets you very little, I think, in writing.
You have to just get into that other place, and you don't even know it's happening. I mean, that's how I look at it. When, you don't even know 3 hours have gone by. I'm not writing anymore, so it's really easy for me to say this. I've had enough. I have a bookstore, and I love, love, love my bookstore. And okay, so we're going to get to Q&A right away, but I just wanted to ask you, during this crazy and scary year, when we've been mostly locked up, could you write? Could you think creatively? How was that for you?
Right. Well, we went deep through lockdown in revision. I mean, in edits. I mean, we were like, Carol and I say, my editor, we say we were like the litmus test for could we do it? I mean, I think Random House closed, the building closed the day we hit send into the copy editing machinery. And then everybody dispersed. I mean, we could talk for a long time about how crazy that was, and it all worked. And I think, and Carol, had this great revelation in a talk I gave maybe several weeks ago, that the COVID ended up creating more intensity in the end of the novel, because I was making the final edits in full lockdown. And the family's under such stress, and the COVID was all around me. And so my family was under great stress. So I think it upped the ante. I will say it caused me to have just extraordinary focus when I needed it. And I mean, what a luxury to be writing a novel in COVID. It was a great treat. Everyone has suffered so much, but it was a different kind of focus. And then the only thing that I have written, Judy, really since is essays. And I wrote one like pretty harrowing essay about my son's accident in June, which was like, took COVID to another place because he ended up in the hospital, and he's fine now. But that was the only thing I could do, was write something like really emotionally trenchant that had COVID woven all in through it. And that's really been it.
Well, I would say that that's a lot. That's a lot. I mean, through every other difficult time in my life, I've always been able to write through it. And, you know, it'd be okay. I would know that I could do it. And the luxury, really, of being locked up here for a year, it will be a year next week. I could not focus. I couldn't do a thing. I've been saying, if only I had, you know, 3 weeks or 3 months or whatever, I could write this little thing that is in my head. No, I couldn't do it. I think, I don't know. I don't know how it's been a year, but it's been a year. And, you know, now I'm double dose vaccinated and I can go back to the store where I want to be.
I love that.
This has been so incredible talking to you, Susan. I'm going to come visit you in Portland, Maine someday.
I'm going to hold you to that.
I
It's the greatest treat to talk to you.
I am. And you will come back to Key West. We have to say Susan was in Key West for Elsie Come Home, a wonderful book, by the way, if you guys don't know it. And it takes place in China. And I was so immersed in that book too. I just loved that book. And you came to Key West at a time when I couldn't be here. And so I missed you. But next time. Now I think we should bring Emily back. I know we started a little bit late. Emily, are you there? Are you there, God? Emily. Hello, Emily. Emily's going to do the Q&A. Our fabulous general manager of Books and Books Key West.
Thank you.
We couldn't have done this year without her.
Thank you. It's been a long year. It's been a long decade this year. So if you do have any questions, please put them in the Ask a Question section at the bottom. We've got a couple trickling in. But just to start off, Susan, you did a lot of research on the fishing industry for this book. Was there, obviously you're from Maine and you said 4 generations. Was there anything that surprised you that you learned? Did you learn something new through the research process?
I did. I learned that what looks like a really simple problem, there must not be very many fish if we don't have very many fishing boats and fishermen, was far more complex, and really sometimes doesn't even have to do with amounts of fish anymore in Maine. It has to do with all kinds of other things around how do you support a fishing industry village by village. And that is something that fascinated me. And I've become quite passionate about the topic. And I forgot. I'm writing I'm about to finish a feature story on this very topic for a magazine. So I've taken it into nonfiction, and I can tell I'm not done with it in terms of being a Mainer and a citizen here in Maine, because if we lose access to the waterfront, it's a big question of access. What's going to happen to Maine, you know? So these are big questions that swirl around Landslide. I tried to weave them into the novel a lot, actually.
Mm-hmm. Great. I felt like I learned a lot about fishing and stuff that I didn't even know I wanted to know about Maine and fishing, and now I know. So I appreciate that. I am not a mother, but there were parts of the book that, even not being a mother, I could relate to so much. Like, for example, I don't want to give anything away, but very early on in the book, she says he's on a fishing boat in Nova Scotia River, and it's 10 men and a woman with tattoos. And I was like, oh no, no. That's all I needed. And I knew we were off to the races on that part of the book. But
so
yeah, I felt very vindicated when it turned out like this was an issue, and how big of the issue you might not know. You kind of have to read the whole book to know, but I knew right away it was something from that one line. But a lot of your books do center around motherhood, womanhood, and place. And in writing those books, and as your children have gotten older too, has that changed? Has that perspective changed? Has it changed in your writing?
Yeah, it's changed enormously. Thank you for asking that. It's funny. I don't have it with me, but I was thinking we would talk about process a little bit, Judy. And I found a scribble in one of my notebooks yesterday that said, what I'd most like to do would be to write a memoir about raising teenage boys. And then I wrote, but I could never, ever do that. That will never be allowed. I mean, that is just verboten, right? But what I really wanted to, and I didn't really want to write that memoir. I was being facetious kind of to myself. Like, I wanted to write this very truthful thing about this exact teenage time, like really unpack it, because like Judy was saying, I haven't read very many books that really stay with the teenage boy and really honor them. And they're either teenage years are skipped over for boys, or there's just the trope, right? The sort of, they're usually menacing or trouble or, so I could have never written Landslide until I became 53, and suddenly I have kids that are almost aging out of teenagehood. And I finally had the things that I wanted to say. I had enough vantage. So you're right. I could, it was only now that I could write this book.
So what are the wolves? Not the wolves. I'm sorry. Your boys. What do your boys think of the wolves?
Well, I have a colleague who has a wolf himself. And it's funny, he wrote me the other day, and he said he was immersed in the book, and he actually got kind of cranky to his family on Saturday because he didn't want anyone talking to him because he was reading the book. And then he finished, and he said, "But what do your boys think of this book?" And I wrote, "They haven't read it. They have not read it, and I'm just fine with that." They're very, very supportive of me as a working mom, and they ask me about my events. I told them all about this event today, but they don't seem to want to read the book. And I think that's just fine. I mean, they're very busy humans right now and in school. They'll read it in due time. I am not someone who, they don't need to read it right now. In fact, I think it would be better if they waited a bit.
I think so. That would be good.
Yeah. I mean, I did say to my colleague, I said, there's nothing in the book that I can't live with them reading. Mm-hmm. But when you're 17, you think everything's you. And really, these are amalgamations. These wolves are not my children at all. But.
Well, I love the wolves, so they could be, because I love them.
Oh, thank you.
I totally understand. I once wrote a piece. I don't do nonfiction, and I'm not good at it. But if I get a first line, I can sometimes write a little essay, personal essay. And I wrote a piece about being the parent of teenagers. And I just remember one line from it was, "And don't be afraid to yell for help when you need it." And because, right, you can't, and just like Nettie is helping,
it's true.
Helping one of the wolves there. And I think that's the only thing you can say is if, you instead of going all inside, get it out there. I need help. I'm having trouble.
I think that's in a way what Jill's doing in that whole book, if I think about it. Judy. That's so true. And she gets help from her best friend, Lara, too.
Oh, she has a wonderful best friend. I wanted to mention Lara. She is wonderful, wonderful woman. There's another line. I just have, did I read you this line about a marriage? I just have to do this. Guys, where is this line? I don't have my glasses. I probably won't be. Marriage is long, and you have to will yourself to choose it. Change or die. And I know. Well, yeah. Right?
Yeah. I don't know who wrote that, but it does ring true to me.
You wrote it. Emily, does our audience have any questions? Do we have questions in our audience?
Yeah, we've got a couple more here. Well, first of all, we have one from Michael, who I suspect is our great librarian, Michael Nelson in Key West. And it is, what's your favorite Stevie Nicks song?
Well, I mean, I guess it's kind of obvious. That one called Landslide. Although, and I'm not making this up, I took the dog for a beach walk on Sunday and they were playing the song Gypsy. And that's a very good Stevie Nicks song. And I found myself singing very loudly to Gypsy. So
there's the dog didn't mind at all.
The dog didn't mind at all.
The dog didn't say, "You're so not cool, Mom."
In fact, I have to say, I think I have a beloved old friend from YMCA camp here with us tonight. I think she's coming from Connecticut. And I remember when we were at camp, we sang a cappella Landslide with candles at Vespers. And we thought it was the most amazing performance that we,
It was. It probably.
Yeah, you don't know.
We nailed it. We nailed it. But I have such fond memories of my friend and of that night. So just wanted to say that.
That's
all right. Well, another question from Mia is Susan. Do you hold fear for your characters? And so entangled with the life at sea, and will they survive when the industry? And we touched on that a little bit. And then she says, "I keep thinking about this family," which Judy.
Thank you. Yeah, I do. I hold fear for them. I held fear for them. I mean, on certain days, that storm Judy talked about, that nor'easter, that's, metaphoric, is also quite literal. There's a huge storm in the book. And I have lived through many, many storms. And you never know if you'll make the crossing, right? They have to make that little crossing back to the mainland. And these things are just so real on a daily basis for so many, people here, and people that live on islands, people that live in remote places. I wanted to make it feel very elemental, the danger, and then the danger of fishing, just incredibly dangerous.
And you did. Do you know a little island called Hupper's Island?
Hupper's Island. I do, off of Port Clyde. Yeah.
Yes. So George and I spent a summer very early in our relationship on Hupper's Island.
Oh my God.
And we had to take the little boat across to, anytime we wanted to go to the mainland. I mean, we wanted to go to Port Clyde, wanted to go get some groceries. We had, it was a little rental house. And so they left us a little boat with, an engine that I forget what I'm talking about. Like a little outboard motor on a rowboat.
Yeah.
And even then, there were storms. I'm phobic about thunderstorms, and we were in a forest of huge pine trees. And oh my God, the storms! I had to, I'm like a dog. I like to run and hide. And I have a dear friend, my best friend from 7th grade, spends a lot of time in Friendship, Maine. And George and I once sailed there from Hupper's Island. We sailed around to Friendship.
I love thinking of you there because, not just because I think it's so cool, because that's one of my favorite parts of Maine, but one of the key fishermen that I interviewed for the novel, he's Port Clyde. He's a legend in Port Clyde. So I have spent time recently in Port Clyde looking at Hubbard's Islands.
Uh-huh.
Not so unlike the Landslide setting, really. It's very similar. Island, little mainland. Yeah.
And we never saw anybody else on the island.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there might have been people, I don't know, but we never saw anybody. So I have my little Maine experiences, enough so that, yeah. I wrote Fudgemania, Mania. Mania.
I like it.
And in a summer where we lived inside a fog for 3 weeks. We never, we were in a cloud. We couldn't see out of anything. And that was in Southwest Harbor.
Okay.
Southwest Harbor.
Oh, fog. Woo.
But a good writing, good for writing.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. Fog is really good for brooding and writing. And yeah. Very good.
Emily?
I think we have time for one more. Let me just I guess this is for both of you. What can we talk a little bit about quarantine? You said you were working on edits, but what was something that's brought you a lot of joy during quarantine, if anything?
Well, Susan, you were locked up with your kids, your whole family, were you?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's been so long, right? That I'm thinking of it in stages. And I mean, I'll go to the silver lining. It's hard to talk about silver linings, right? But yeah, there we all were. I think in a way, if Landslide is in part about, can a mother stay connected to her teenage boys? Can she still reach them? Can she not lose them? Then there was a time in the height of the lockdown where I was living the novel. I was trying to connect, and it was happening. And I think that was really a sweet spot of a silver lining that was so fraught with so much else, but at least those channels were really open. They kind of close and open again and again. That time is gone now. Like I don't have that connection right now, but I think Jill inspires me when and I think of it, the way she was trying to connect. She's in a way fiercer, definitely fiercer than me. Like she's made me talk more openly. And that's really cool that I'm learning from her. All right, Judy, what about you? What give us a joy? I know.
My daughter taught me to bake. My daughter is a great cook and baker, and I am not. I like to eat things, good things, but I've never been a cook or never baked. And I like cupcakes. And so she taught me to make cupcakes. And now when I say, like freshmen get there, what do they say? Freshman 15 or something, you gain pounds. And I've never gained weight in my whole adult life. I mean, I just don't. I can eat as many cupcakes as I want and I don't gain weight until now. Until now. And I don't know what that's all about, which makes me want to rush and finish all the frozen cupcakes in my freezer. And then I'll be done. And I'm not going to bake them again. Then I'll be done with them. And maybe that's what's given me my freshman five.
You can bring them to the store if you need to.
Oh, yeah, no, I have to have these at home. I had one before we came on tonight, Susan. I thought, well, it'll I'll just have one and it'll perk me up and I'll be really lively.
I love that.
But I think George and I talk a lot about a closeness that's come from being this way. I mean, we've always worked together at home and we work together at the store, but there's a certain closeness that we feel has come from this time. An appreciation of of being together.
That's so well said.
I would not want to repeat it. I don't want the rest of the world to have to ever go through this again. And, you know, there were times when we thought, oh, God, this is the rest of our life. You know, we're old and this is it. And we're never going to get out of this. We're never going to come out again. But, you know, we're starting to come out a little because we've been vaccinated. And so we're coming out again. And it feels good.
Yeah. Well, I guess on that note, I think that brings us to the end. I think we're running out of time. So I guess I just want to say on behalf of Books and Books Everywhere, from Key West and into in Miami, the locations there. Thank you so much to Susan. The book can be purchased from that button below. You can buy it that'll take you to the Books and Books in Key West website and ready to ship out books right away. And we will also, for upcoming events for both stores, visit their various websites, booksandbooks.com or booksandbookskw.com. And I guess that's it. Thank you so much, ladies, for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. The way we ended with you coming back out into the world gives me goosebumps. And I'm just so glad and so grateful that you have your health and that you are so generous as to spend time talking to writers and proselytizing about books. We're all very, very lucky for that. So
I love it. I love it a lot more than writing. So, but that's after 50 years, Susan. 50 years of writing. You have to give us that too.
All right. Well,
thank you, Emily. See you tomorrow. Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Susan. Bye, everyone. Thanks for coming.